They say a picture can paint 1,000 words, like this one. It was taken in July 1989, 2 months after the birth of Rory McIlroy, during the ninth stage of the Tour de France from Pau to Courtrai, a ski resort in the French Pyrenees. I finished the stage and there were a couple of Irish journalists waiting to talk to me. One was John Brennan from the Irish Press. I did not want to speak to John. I did not want to speak to anyone. It was written all over my face. Pro cycling was brutal. And then I became a journalist. Day 5 of the Masters. Just got out of the shower, 5:30 in the morning. I'm wearing a baseball cap because my hair is still wet, and that sound that you hear in the background is Conor McKeon's alarm, which has just gone off, and he's not turned it off because there, I put it on snooze. He's not turned it off because he's actually got up a bit earlier and he's in the shower. Anyway, just wanted to give you a sense of what it's like here. Boy, I look so fucking tired. Got about 4 hours sleep last night, and I woke up trying to figure out what we're going to do today. We're in a house in the suburbs. I'm sharing with 3 colleagues, Conor McKeon, Alex Michelli, and this man who greets me who's up before me every morning at work. Hello, Martin Dempster, the Scotsman.
Good morning, Paul.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Lack of sleep, but apart from that, we're doing fine.
Now, every morning I come in here, Martin, and you're already at your laptop. You usually have a cup of coffee beside you, so you start early and finish late.
Very much so. That's Masters Week. Not a lot of sleep. I'll catch up on the sleep when I get home.
Now, we arrived here rather last on Sunday, Martin, and we were inside looking at the was it Valero Texas Open? Yeah, in San Antonio. And Bob McIntyre from Scotland, the only Scot playing at the Masters this week, went to the 18th at the Valero with a chance to win. Just came up short, but came in here as one of the favourites. And we spoke a little bit yesterday on the video about how disappointing that must be for you, particularly. I mean, there's no cheering in the press books, but we all cheer. But we're getting up this morning now, very hopeful that Rory will have another great day, that Shane, who's tied 6th, will be back in contention. But for you, it's a little bit different, isn't it? You're not that hopeful, I don't imagine.
No. Bob, as you say, came in here playing great. He had finished 4th in the Players' Championship as well in his previous outing before the Valero Texas Open. But yesterday was just what can happen here. He got frustrated. He was actually tied 4th for fairways hit. He hit 14 out of 16 fairways, which you're looking to do. However, this place can bite you at any time, and it bit Bob at the par 5 15th, where he split the fairway with his drive, had an iron with his second shot. Lo and behold, he walks off with a 9, having put 2 balls in the water. Signs for an 80. Very, very frustrated at the end. Unlike him, he didn't speak. That's not really Bob, but that shows you where his head was. And he now faces a real fight just to be here at the weekend.
I was going to ask you about that. Did he speak? I'm not surprised he didn't. He's also. I was actually woke up about 2:30, had a quick listen to one of the more popular podcasts here, and they led with Bob. Because again, he was one of the favourites. But they led with his reaction. I don't know what hole it was. He made a kind of rude gesture, which is not done around.
No, that was at the 15th.
The 15th.
Yeah, that was his when he put his first ball in the water. He did a one-finger gesture, and that was picked up on someone at home, I think, maybe just took a picture of that. And Bob spoke to me earlier in the week. He was picked up for bad language in Valero Texas Open in the microphones. He's been picked up before. He's one of those guys, as he says, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And that was just an example of how Bob, when he's in the heat of battle, he talked about redlining, but I think he has to learn a little bit from that. No, you don't want people to change necessarily. No, that's what's got him here. But there are times you have to handle adversity. But the adversity was what Bob had yesterday. And he's not going to just change overnight. But going forward, he's 29, he's a dad now. I think you just might find that he just needs to just calm down a wee bit.
Here's another picture, a newspaper cutting. In October of 1996, when Rory McIlroy was 7 years old, I travelled to the Volvo Masters in Spain to watch Darren Clarke, Paul McGinley and Padraig Harrington. It was Harrington's fourth season as a pro, McGinley's fifth season and Clarke's sixth season. They had all won tournaments on the European Tour, but had yet to play at the Masters. Clarke would have to wait another 2 years before travelling to Augusta. Harrington would wait 4, and it was 6 years later, in 2002, before Paul would make his debut. Getting to the Masters is hard. Only 18 Irishmen have played at Augusta. The latest is Tom McKeon. This morning, at 10:25 to be precise, I followed McKeon from the 10T to Amen Corner. He's 23 years old and had been dreaming about this his whole life. He never dreamed about missing the cut. Now, Brian, you are the son of a reporter, and I'm the son of a cyclist. And I know your dad wrote about my dad. I'm just wondering how you would feel about writing about me. You never did, by the way, did you?
No, I never did write about you. I might have seen one of your races, all right, cycling around Dublin city centre. Were you in one of those?
I wasn't one of those.
Yeah.
Did you ever see me getting off the bike after a bad day?
No, but I can imagine it wouldn't be all that easy to interview one of you guys after cycling up a mountain or down a mountain or around a mountain or whatever you had to do.
Yeah. I was reminded of it today, this afternoon rather. I was standing behind you as Tom McKeon came across to give his interview after his round, after signing his card. So I was standing behind you, and there was you. There were only two reporters there. Well, there was a Canadian reporter there. I don't know why he was there. Why was he there?
He was working for, I think he's working for the Masters.
Yeah, he's working for the Masters. So there were only two really who went out of their way to go and ask Tom how he about his day and how his Masters his experience. So there's only two there. Yeah. There was you, the only Irishman, and there was Joy
from India. Yeah.
Joy from India, who works on the Asian tour, and there's a reason he was there as well. Okay. Yeah. Now the point I'm trying to make is this: there are how many Irish reporters in the media centre this week? I think 8.
7 or 8 of us.
At least 8. Yeah. And yet here we have only the 18th Irishman to play at the Masters, and over the course of the 2 days, only one reporter has actually gone down to ask him about it.
Yeah. Yesterday was right on deadline when he was coming in, so it wasn't convenient. Rory McIlroy was doing his bit. I can't remember what the reason was. Anyway, it clashed with something else. But today I was able to go out, follow him around, watch him play. Yeah. I knew he'd be disappointed. He shot 76. He took 36 putts. He had a couple of 3-putts. He needed a fast start. Didn't get a fast start. 3-putt of the first. Made a 7 at the second. He hit a second shot and hit a 3. He went into a bush. Yeah. And it's just, he's 5 over after 5. And you're going,
he's missing the cut.
Okay, and he's probably missing the cut. Well, in fairness to him, he's missing the cut.
Now,
but he played beautifully for a lot of the day. In fact, if it wasn't for the putting, he played well enough to make.
He did, and I watched him. I followed him down Amen Corner and watched him play 10. Yeah. 11, 12, 13. He played he hit the ball beautifully. But anyway, there's a greater point here. Yeah. There's a greater point. So as I say, I'm standing behind you as Tom walks across. And I'm reminded of myself on a bad day because, as I say, I followed him from the 18th green to the scorer's hut. He had his hands in his pockets, he had his head down, and he was not in good form. He was not in good form when he arrived and was asked, the Canadian guy asked him a question, how would you sum up that week? I don't know, a bit annoying. Yeah, it was a bit of everything, probably a bit of every emotion. And then the Canadian says, why are you saying annoying? Yeah. He says, well, Mr. Cut, that's a bit annoying, isn't it? Yeah. So, not a great start.
No, I mean, you have to, when you go into this little pen, you have to say, who are you looking for? And you say, Tom McKeon. Oh, Joy's already asked for him. So the manager knows, the Augusta Green Jacket knows, the manager says, go over and talk to the lad. He has a look over and sees who's over there for a starter. He says, okay, it's Brian Keown, Joy, and Paul Kimmage just hanging around there. Okay.
So you probably only came over because I was there.
Probably only
Probably
because you were
because I
there.
was there, yeah.
They're reasonable. They're reasonable. But you've been sent to, normally when you stand up on the podium, you're getting a gold medal or something. But this was like, punishment. But I actually started off with how would you sum up your week? It's just to get it started.
Yeah.
And then the man asked
So
the thing
it's
about
really
the annoying.
the skill of that, Brian. It's
But
the
you're
skill
trying
of someone who comes over and he wants to do a Bob McIntyre and start, shouting. I don't know, is he that way inclined?
No,
Tom?
Tom is
probably not.
generally very easygoing,
Yeah.
soft-spoken guy. But I knew he was disappointed, and I kind of had an idea what I wanted to write. Obviously, he had a million putts, and that was the difference because he struck the ball so well from tee to green. So I was saying, okay, but what did he do well? And he really wants to be back here. And it was a couple of the shots that he hit. The shot into the 10th, he's down behind a magnolia tree, totally blocked out. And he hits this 5-iron, 20 yards of cut onto the green. I wanted to write about that.
Yeah, forget about the golf for a minute. Talk about him. Talk about him and him coming towards you, and he's got these dark eyes, and he's not a good
He's
form.
disappointed.
And he's disappointed, yeah, absolutely. But you're doing your job, and you have
Sure.
to try and coax something out. of him.
Sure.
And you did that very well.
Yeah, well, we got.
You
we
have
got through-
experience. You have experience at that.
Okay, well, you
Tell
just
me
said
about a
it's-
bad experience.
Yeah, well, okay. For example, at the PGA Championship a few years ago, and I often get it wrong. I mean, you often get it wrong. A guy's in bad form and he's just not going to have it. No matter what you say, they'll pick it up the wrong way, even if you perhaps didn't really mean it that way, or they might think you're a bit obsessed about a certain aspect of my game, but you still ask anyway. To hell with it, But there was at the PGA a few years ago, and Shane Lowry hadn't been putting great in the build-up, and we were talking on the Tuesday, and mentioned his putter, and he says that thing needs to go in the furnace to get it to heat up. And he said, my plan this week is just to get the ball to the hole. Anyway, he played very well on a certain day, I can't remember, Thursday or Friday, and all I said was, as you said on Tuesday, at least you were getting the ball to the hole. Well, you've got an obsession with my putting. And he stormed off and he left us all standing there. To which, obviously, the rest of my colleagues who were relying on a few more quotes to fill out the reports.
You've ruined it.
Thanks
You've
very
ruined
much,
it for everybody.
Joe. Brick. And, you ruined it. So today, yeah, you're trying to ease him into it, saying, look, very unlucky at the start, the way that happened. Your second shot hitting the tree and going in the bush. And slowly get him to open up about that.
Okay.
And then
And
gradually...
you did very well. You did very well. No, you did. Like, you could see
He didn't walk off.
he didn't walk off. No, not only he wasn't. There was no question of him walking off.
yeah.
Certainly at the start, a little bit iffy
Sure.
after that first question. But
Why are you
he-
disappointed?
you did-
And I missed the cut,
yeah, you did warm him, and you did get him around to just trying to express that
Yeah.
disappointment. Put that disappointment into words, I suppose.
Yeah,
is
you just
is
said,
the-
like, I mean, the greens here are so hard, Tom. I mean, can you explain for the layman at home watching on the television, what is it like when you go out the first day and they're like light and compared to with the way they were last week and the early part of this week, and then so you're going out the second day and you're going, Jesus, yesterday, Liebert, and it's a bit slow in the water, there's a bit of dew. So what do you think? And he says, it's just uncertainty, it's guesswork, you're on edge the whole time, So it was that. It's all about experience here, isn't it? And so that was what caught.
So go to the other point then. Being how like I making the point that the pros, the amateurs, everyone's invited. The amateurs are invited. The pros are invited.
Sure.
But the pros really have to earn it, and McKibben really had to earn it. He had to win to get here.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the guys here you're in the top 50 in the world. You've won a PGA Tour event. I mean, one of the guys he was playing with, the Canadian guy, doesn't hit the ball very far at all. He won 2 events
Campbell.
last year.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't hit the ball
Yeah.
270 yards. He's one of the
Yeah.
shortest hitters on the tour.
Yeah.
Shot, I think he was level par for the 2 rounds. So there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to. So Tom McKibben won the Hong Kong Open last year, 27 under par. So he gets into the Open and he gets into the
and he
Masters.
gets into here.
Now, to get back here, he's going to have to win another tournament probably, or get into the top 50 in the world.
Just a lack of appreciation, I suppose.
Yeah.
He's playing, and we're as guilty as anyone because on the video we flagged yesterday, it was live or today at the Masters, and it was Shane and it was
Sure,
Rory,
Shane
and Rory,
Shane
and that was
Rory,
it. There was no mention of McKibben.
Yeah.
We didn't speak about him on the diary. We probably weren't going to speak about him today until it kind of struck me. Well, it's this is a hell of an achievement to play here, and we actually should be talking about him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this guy is after Rory McIlroy, the biggest talent to come out of Irish golf in the last 20 years.
Yeah. So what does that what does that say about us? Have we been spoiled? We are being spoiled, really.
We are being spoiled when we got to, your Harringtons and your Clarks and your McIlroys and your Lowrys. I mean, these are world beaters, guys that have played and won majors.
And the other one I'm thinking is Seamus Power, who's played
Seamus
here.
Power, who's won twice on the PGA Tour. He's played here twice. But only 18 Irish guys have played in the Masters.
Yeah.
I think 6 or 7 of them being amateurs. So it's 11 pros.
Yeah.
11 pros in the history of art. Since this thing started, Joe Carr played okay, and then Christie Jr. was the first pro to play. I mean, that was like 1977. So, not that many have played. There was no Des Smith here, or John O'Leary, none of those guys. So he's an amazing talent. He hits the ball so well. I mean, he was when I looked at the stats when he came off, he was about 4th for hitting fairways, top 15 for greens in regulation. They had 36 putts today, and you just can't compete around here with that.
Yeah.
He played so well, and it's just, you don't want it to be a one and done, do you? You want to be coming back here regularly.
No, sure.
But he's in live, so harder to get world ranking points.
It is, and that's another conversation. But anyway, the point about it is, Brian, I just want to say well done for going down there and doing a great job.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, and it was nice to talk to him. And actually, he left by the time he left.
Sorry,
he was actually in quite good form.
He was. I'm just sorry you never had the opportunity to interview me on a bad day.
Could you imagine that? I wouldn't have had any problem.
Thank you, Brian. Now, Conor, there was a moment this afternoon when we thought Rory was going to have a bad day. He'd bogeyed 10, hit a poor approach shot, a 9-iron to 11, but made par. Birdied 12, but then so did the two guys he was playing with, Mason Howell and Cameron Young, and then hit a bad drive on 13 that went way right and into the, inverted commas, pine straw. Now, we were sitting side by side in the media centre when this happened, and we watched him laid up. And you said to me at the moment, when he laid up from the pine straw, you said to me what?
He's within 8 yards of where he was last year on Sunday when he hit maybe, I mean, a lot of people have called it the worst shot of his professional career.
Yeah.
And almost the most damaging as well.
Yeah, so very close to where he was last year. And then we see him walking up to the shot and pulling at his shirt. And I said, Jesus, I'm not sure about that. He's off, this might be a bit. And then something extraordinary happens. He hits it in the fucking water, right? He hits it in the water, and I, give it a good old Bob McIntyre, oh, Jesus. And then everybody starts laughing because I'm not the only one watching this who thinks he's hitting the water, except they're playing last year's shot.
Yeah.
And I haven't copped to change his shirt. So, deja vu all over again, as they say.
Yeah.
Only it wasn't. Hits a lovely shot up, holds a putt for birdie.
Yeah. And it was kind of, like, that stretch was obviously the kickstart of a round that started brilliantly and then kind of lagged a bit. He was finding it hard firstly to hit fairways. And then on a couple of fairways, when he not only found them, but nearly like drove the ball over them, he was leaving himself little dinky wedges. It was like the old Rory, and he didn't really have. But that was an amazing stretch. The par fives is an amazing thing, but he's getting birdies now laying up at par fives, which isn't really what he's supposed to do.
No.
And like an awful lot of what we saw today from Rory, and even yesterday as well, he's doing this in a sort of non-conventional way, and he's just relying on his talent, and it's actually extraordinary.
And when you say non-conventional,
well, he's not hitting fairways.
right? Okay.
He's really not hitting fairways.
Right.
He's not getting on par fives and 2.
Yeah.
He has played 8 par fives this week.
Yeah.
He's been on one of them in 2.
Yeah.
Yet he's birdied 7 of them.
So birdies 13, then birdies 15, 16, 17, 18. Now you have some incredible stats.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not big. Like I think.
Stats.
Yeah, I'm not big.
No, I'm not big on stats.
No, I'm not big on stats, and I think it takes away because it kind of compartmentalizes everything you see.
I liked last night's stat. The one I actually asked him the question at the press conference about only one of 6 defending champions to hold a share, at least a share of the lead in the first round when they're defending.
Yeah,
I like that stat.
Yeah,
there's an even better one.
Yeah, well, he's now got the biggest 36-hole lead ever at the Masters.
in the history of the event.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The second stat goes back to the par fives. There are he has played 8 par fives. He's 7 under. He hasn't eagled any of them. He hasn't hit one fairway. And he has to lay up on every single one.
Right.
So it's the oldest cliche about Augusta. You have to make your money on the par fives.
Right.
And he is.
But not doing
He's
it.
doing it in the most unconventional way.
Right, great.
But, and I'm going to ask you, right?
Yeah.
Who's Davis Riley?
Well, I know he's a player. I wouldn't be sure he's even in the field.
Yeah.
Is he in the field?
He is in the field.
In the field. Okay.
So 2 things to know about Davis Riley.
Right.
He is last, 91st out of 91 for fairways in regulation. He's also last on the leaderboard. He shot 18 over, the biggest total.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's 91st in fairways in regulation and 91st in the tournament.
Okay.
Who's the guy who's 90th in fairways in regulation?
Well, I think you've teed it up nicely. It's not Rory, yeah.
It's Rory McIlroy.
Okay. Oh my God.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, so take out the par fives thing in the middle, which is its own anomaly, but link the first stat.
Yeah.
Biggest 36-hole lead ever.
Yeah.
90 out of 91 in fairway regulation. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like, what I remember last year when we came away on the Sunday thinking I'll never see something quite so remarkable again. And it does stand on its own for the sheer swings and the number of times you completely reversed. But what Rory McIlroy did today in Augusta, I think will forever be remembered. I think it's his best ever round. He obviously had that incredible Sunday a few years back when he got a backdoor third or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But to go out as the defending champion in the lead and put that much distance between himself and the field and the way that he did it is phenomenal.
So his temperament throughout, Conor, didn't stand out about it. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're doing that, then it's because it's the temperament that's driving this, is underpinning it, rather.
Yeah, exactly that. And I mean, he hit some great shots out of trees to get onto the green, but it's just like the bogey that he had on 10 was an annoying one because, you know, he got his chip shot close-ish and he lipped out on one of those kind of downhill ones. Yeah. And you kind of be sort of feeling to yourself. And like at that stage, he hadn't had a birdie since the 4th hole. Do you know what I mean? And he'd had 2 bogeys. So he was going backwards. Like the leaderboard showed that Patrick Reed was catching him amongst other people.
Yes. Another reason for my bad language.
Yeah. And then he went absolutely gangbusters. And the highlight of it all, obviously, is the chip in on 17. Like, that's his Tiger on 16 moment. Yeah. Because it's just extraordinary for what it does. Yeah. But people forget about Tiger on 16. Yeah. That although it's his greatest ever shot, he bogeyed 17 and 18 and ended up in a playoff with Chris DeMarco.
Right.
Rory chipped in. And then, and this is interesting, I asked him one question tonight, I wanted to get a second one. So yesterday on 18, he played this big high draw and nearly hit the tree on the right-hand side and ended up in the bunker.
You said this to me.
And last year in the 72nd hole in the playoff, he hit this brilliant cut. And it was this new shot that he'd worked on. Yeah. And then on 18 today, he hit the cut and put himself there. Right. And landed his shot absolutely perfectly on that slope and it came back. Yeah. And his putting has been sensational this week.
Well, you told us so. You certainly told me so. Because I know you wanted to ask him that yesterday. Now, he wasn't the only Irishman to have a great day today. I'm not sure, actually, I've ever seen Shane play as well around here. In the way, again, temperament, the control he had.
Yeah, it was so different to yesterday. Like, he 4-putted yesterday from nowhere on 4. And then, like, chipped in for eagle on 13. It was all drama. Yeah. Whereas today he was so measured. Like, he got that little birdie on 1.
We were looking up at one stage. How many pars had he got?
14 pars.
14 pars. So we were saying, when did Faldo do that at Muirfield?
Yeah.
It was kind of almost Faldo-esque.
And then he had a brilliant birdie on 16. He should have had a birdie on 17. And I thought that would just be the one little thing that might annoy him. Yeah. And then I saw him. He hit first on 18 and was standing right beside it, and he could see it was going straight at it. Yeah. He hit the same little slope as Rory, and it came back. And he got the putt as well. It's such a big thing. And it's not just because it brings him up by 1 stroke. It's because it kind of defangs the miss on 17. Right. So you could see when he came out.
Yeah.
And what I found really interesting about him was that he didn't come out sort of big, happy, smiley, heading them, which I'm sure he felt inside.
Yeah.
He was trying to keep an even keel.
Yeah.
And I think that even keel served him during the round. And I think
Yes.
he'll take it into
As Rory was in his press
Totally.
conference, this even keel yesterday in particular, I thought.
He's so comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another point, but we were also standing beside each other when Shane came out, and I agree, it wasn't, he wasn't buoyant.
No, he wasn't buoyant.
Wasn't buoyant, but very happy. And it's the badness in me because I thought, was it you there last year, or was it? No, it wasn't last
Yeah,
year, was it?
17.
Was it?
Yeah.
When he was asked about, he's coming out to face the media, and it was the second question. He said he's not in great humour, and he's asked about Rory, and he literally flips.
Yeah.
Literally flips. I was thinking, I wonder should I ask about Rory?
We could hear the roar from 15.
We could hear the roar
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. But I mean, 3 under with no bogeys is a brilliant round for Shane. And there was a couple of putts, like I saw him on 3 where he missed the green, then had a chip, didn't get it close enough, and it was just one of those ones with a small bit of break on it.
Right.
And he kind of nailed that one. And then on 4, he had a brilliant lag putt from where he 4-putted the other day
Yeah.
and knocked it stone dead. And I actually think he just built his confidence as the round went along.
Yeah. Okay, let's at the risk of upsetting Shane, let's go back to Rory again because look at what a story if Rory was to put the jacket on Shane. Like no, look, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I'd love to think it would happen.
Yeah.
I don't think Shane has that ability to put his foot on the accelerator and just go the way Rory's gone the last few days. And what is he, 7 behind?
7, yeah.
7 behind. I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
I don't think anybody has the ability to catch Rory.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what point I'm trying to make. It's obviously been a long
Well,
day.
what's interesting is that he's playing with Tommy Fleetwood tomorrow.
Okay, yes.
And it's a great pair.
Yes.
Like, obviously they're competitors, but I was just reminded of that time when Shane and Paul Carrington played together in Kiowa Island when Phil Mickelson won.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And you could tell they were having the time of their lives, and they rocketed up the leaderboard. They both came into contention very late on. And I think there'd just be a level of comfort with those two playing together tomorrow.
Right. The leaderboard is sensational.
Yeah, it's so stacked.
Isn't it? And with Rose back there again. And Patrick Reed, who's having a great week. Hatton is there. Who else stands out? Here's the question, Conor. I was really because the pairings tomorrow, they're out very late. So Shane is out third last with Tommy Fleetwood, and then Patrick Reed with
Patrick Reed, Justin Rose.
Justin Rose, yeah, and then Rory and Sam Burns again. And I kind of wondered, like, given now this 6-hole cushion he has, would he not be better? Would it not have been better for him had he been paired with Reed tomorrow? Because we know there's a bit of edge there.
Yeah, there's loads of edge there. But I don't think so. The thing that I found very interesting, and this came out in the Fried Egg interview that he did last year. When
Fried Egg is a podcast.
A podcast, yeah. And
it's a superb podcast, but has an unbelievably crap name. Don't ever call your podcast a Fried Egg.
Yeah, and you told them so the other day.
And I told him so the other day.
But no, what I found really interesting was that he revealed that when he spoke to Bob Rotella on Sunday morning last year, the thing that he said was most on his mind was the kind of duel with the Shambo, because that was obviously a hangover from the US Open.
Yeah.
And the advice that he was given was, ignore him.
Yeah.
Don't pay any attention to him. He's invisible.
Yeah.
And if you remember, DeChambeau had a little whinge when he came off saying Rory didn't talk to me.
Yes.
So I do think
yes,
because Reed is such a kind of big character around here, he is not a crowd favourite. He is from around here. Himself and Rory have history. He beat Rory and Hazeltine in the Ryder Cup. He wiped them in 2018 when they were in the last group here.
Yes, indeed.
So I think Rory would just have totally ignored Patrick Reed.
Yeah.
But I don't think anybody has a factor here. I don't think if Rory plays at 60% of what he played the first 2 days, he's going to win.
It's teed up now for an incredible weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, because it goes back to that thing about comparing this round to Sunday last year. Yeah. Rory used that phrase, maybe in the same interview, that if he was ever going to win at Augusta, he was going to do it throwing up all over himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is whatever the opposite of that
It
is.
is.
This is what we always envisaged when we thought about Rory
Yes.
playing to his potential. It's almost like when we were all trying to figure out how is he not playing so well in this course that suits him so well. And the reason was not the course, it was the Masters.
Yeah.
But the Masters thing has been de-shrouded now.
Absolutely for him. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Conor. A fantastic weekend in Prospect, and I didn't sleep too well last night. I'm not sure if I'm going to sleep too well tonight either with the excitement. It's great. We'll see you tomorrow.